back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for all right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final.
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Thursday, March 7th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So let's get into what we are going to talk about for today. We got a variety of topics to get into. So we'll start off by talking about Aaron Rodgers' recent comments on a podcast, talking about how much longer he intends on playing. So we'll get into that. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about Deebo Samuel's comments on the Super Bowl loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. Then we'll get into the Giants and talk about their struggles as an organization. Louis Riddick of ESPN had some comments yesterday, so I wanted to get into that, talk about what he had to say. And then in the final part of the show, talk about the Bills and their the moves that they made yesterday, releasing a lot of guys. So we'll get into that as well. So let's get into the first topic, which is discussing Aaron Rodgers. And, he's ready to go for 2024. So he recently went on a podcast. It was called, it's a podcast I haven't heard of. It's on the Look Into It podcast hosted by UFC commentator Eddie Bravo. And basically, he talked about, where he's at, and he basically hinted at, the possibility of him playing he was quoted by saying he wants to play possibly 2, 3, or 4 more years. But he did say that, good fortune has to play a role in that. Because obviously, if he suffers another catastrophic injury, knock on wood that he doesn't, that's not going to happen. But if he stays healthy, that is his intention, is to play, maybe 4 more years and get into, his mid-40s. And for me personally, I love to watch the guy play. He's been one of my favorite quarterbacks growing up. And to see again, I've said this numerous times on the show whenever we've, discussed this, but seeing him go down like that in week 1 was devastating. For me, and I have a lot of friends that are Jet fans, family members that are Jet fans, and it just was it was rough to see that, and that basically just derailed the Jets season. And you go back to when I talked about McCole Hardman and his comments on his time with the Jets. They basically had no plan once Rodgers went down. And Zach Wilson stepped in, and the season really didn't go anywhere. There were moments where I was like, oh, maybe they could, tread water, and, Rodgers, there was a possibility he could come back. We never got to see it because the Jets were pretty much out of it. But, there were moments where you're like, okay, maybe this team could, back themselves into a playoff spot, especially with how the defense was playing. But that just, it wasn't the case. The offense just could not get anything going, and You went from Zach Wilson to Trevor Siemian, to Tim Boyle, then to Trevor Siemian, back to Zach Wilson. And it was, back to Trevor Siemian. It just was it was a mess. And again, the Jets, they didn't bring in a legit backup quarterback. Well, now Trevor Siemian did win a couple of games, but again, you saw a lot of these backup quarterbacks win games, and they should have, invested in getting someone that, could have been an upgrade over Zach Wilson. But they didn't do that. They did not do that. Because I guess they just figured that Rodgers would play every single game and Zach Wilson would learn underneath him. But that just ended up not happening. Zach Wilson got thrown back in immediately, and again, the Jets finish 7-10, and that was the same record they finished with in 2022. You would have thought that they would have finished with a worse record, but no, they finished with the same record. So, but with Rodgers coming back, again, you're coming off of an Achilles injury. You're 40 years old. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And listen, I'm hoping for the best. There's people out there that, of course, are down on it, that he's just going to get hurt again. And, I kind of lean towards that way too, unfortunately. And I don't want to. I want Rodgers to bounce back and, come out and have this great season and the Jets be a good team. I just don't want him going out like that. Because he's too great of a player for him to go out like that. But even if he is healthy, you look at the conference. The conference is a gauntlet. So, it's going to be a tough path for the Jets. But you know what? If he's healthy and if they could, look, the Jets have some work to do on the offense. They really do. The offensive line needs work. But when you have Joe Douglas coming out and saying that the offensive line is fine, that's not, you don't want to hear that. They have to address this. They need to improve this because Rodgers is going to get hurt again if that's not the case. He can't take these hits. And sure enough, what happened? The first game of the year, he's trying to avoid a sack from Leonard Floyd, and he ends up tearing his Achilles. They need to fix that. Get some more weapons on the offense. You have Garrett Wilson, you have Breece Hall. I mean, I think Allen Lazard will be better with Rodgers being healthy, but you need more weapons. You definitely need more weapons. Now, again, I don't know, some of the big free agent wide receivers, they got signed or franchise tagged. T. Higgins got franchise tagged. Mike Evans got signed by the Bucs, so he's off the market. There was some speculation that, hey, maybe the Jets can make a push for him. I mean, there's some other receivers out there, but also Michael Pittman got franchise tagged. I saw that the Jaguar. I'm interested to see where Calvin Ridley ends up because it seems like there's conflicting reports. The Jaguars want him back, but now it seems like he's unlikely to go back to the Jaguars because now they just used a franchise tag on Josh Allen. So now, I mean, they could try to work on a deal to get Ridley back, but is that going to happen? I don't know. But it seems like he might not come back. So I'm interested to see where he can end up. Maybe the Jets are a team that try to bring him in. But I don't know. It's just the Jets have some issues on the offense. And when you have a 40-year-old quarterback, you need to, you got to protect him and you got to give him weapons. And there are some weapons on the Jets offense, but, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, like I said. But they need to do more. And that's why I always, whenever I talk about Rodgers and, the guys that he recruited, again, go back to what Brady did in Tampa. They drafted a left tackle, they built this offensive line for him, brought back Gronk, brought in Antonio Brown. And you already had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin there. Leonard Fournette you brought in, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl. And they had a good defense. And, again, good defense. Jets have a good defense. So I mean, the Bucks did a good job. Well, also Brady had something to do with it too. But Brady recruited the right guys. Rodgers is recruiting Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard. But I mean, Lazard was a nice player with the Packers. He just fell off with the Jets, and a lot of it did have to do with Rodgers getting hurt. Randall Cobb, again, was a solid player at one point, but he is not, what he once was. Great locker room guy, no question about that. But the Jets need to win games, and Randall Cobb's not making an impact on the field, and he's just a good locker room guy. Well, he's got to help you win games. So that's also part of it. So yeah, Rodgers not as good of a recruiter as Brady was. That's another thing you could add to the reasons why Brady is better. But look, I hope Rodgers plays for 4 more years. That would be awesome. But I just it's hard to say that. And look, the vast majority of people are going to say that it's not going to happen. But I'll try to be in the minority and say, you know what, maybe it can happen. I'll go against the grain, and be on the side of, you know what, he could do it. He could do it. But I mean, if he suffers another major injury next year, then all bets are off. But again, the Jets have to do something. They cannot go into next season the way the offense is. They got to add to it. Whether it's through the draft, through free agency. I mean, if they make a trade somehow. I mean, I know they were looking to trade for Devontae Adams, but that's not going to happen. That's not happening. They got to look elsewhere. Whether you're drafting a receiver, offensive line, I think, should be a top priority. They got to fix this line. The same problem with the team we'll talk about a little bit later, the New York Giants. The Jets have had offensive line problems for years. So they got to fix this line. They have to. But who knows? I mean, we'll see. Free agency's coming up, the draft in the coming months as well. We'll see what they end up doing, but I mean, you're banking on Vera Tucker to come back and be healthy. He's been hurt. And when he solid lineman, but keeps getting hurt. Mekhi Becton, they banking on him coming back, and he dealt with injuries. They need to fix it. So right now you got. So this is kind of what ESPN has on their depth chart. So you got Carter Warren, Connor McGovern. Some of these names I can't even pronounce. I'm not even going to. And Mekhi Becton left tackle. But yeah, so Vera Tucker obviously got hurt. But yeah, the line definitely needs some work. And if they don't fix it, again, it's going to be a repeat. It's going to be a repeat. Definitely need another receiver. They did release CJ Uzama, so at the tight end spot. Tyler Conklin actually wasn't bad for them. So, but we'll see what they end up doing. And also on top of that, is it possible that maybe they could draft another quarterback? Maybe you draft one, you bring in a veteran. Because again, Rodgers, who knows? I mean, he could say he intends on playing, multiple years. But again, if he gets hurt, maybe he says, you know what? I keep getting hurt. I got to walk away. And then you're left with nothing. At least if you could you draft a quarterback, maybe you at least have some kind of contingency plan. But I don't know. It's all just hypotheticals. It's just if he gets hurt, maybe you draft a quarterback, so at least you have again a contingency plan. But I don't know. again, we have to see how it all goes. But yeah, it's a year-to-year thing. I mean, you just got to hope for the best. And for me, I hope he stays healthy. I hope he goes out there and balls out. But again, the Jets, they have some issues that they need to address, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. And as long as you still have this defense together, you have the defense. The offense, it needs some work. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. But yeah, that's pretty much it when talking about this. Let me know what you guys think about Rodgers. What are your expectations for him going into next year? What do you think the Jets can potentially do? Whether it's in the draft, free agency, what moves do you think? What players do you think they could either draft or sign in the offseason? So with that being said, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we'll talk about Deebo Samuel, his comments reflecting on the Super Bowl loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows with 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. Some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about Deebo Samuel and him reflecting on the Super Bowl loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. So he made an appearance on the Up and Adams show, and he talked about, he gave his thoughts on how he's feeling after the loss. So he said, now I've kind of put it behind me. 2 Super Bowl losses in 5 years, that's pretty rough, being right there. The 2 that we've been in and falling short, it's just so heartbreaking. But at the end of the day, yeah, you've got to move on. Now, this was the other thing that I thought was interesting that he said. He also said, people just say there's always next year, but I heard that in 2019, and it took us 4 more years to get where we at. And, yeah, I mean, it's true, though, because again, I've talked about this. They lose the Super Bowl back in 2019 or back in 2020, whatever you want to, 2019-2020 season. And then the following year, the 49ers get ravaged by injuries. Pretty much everybody gets hurt. And they end up going, I think, 6-10 on the season. They don't even make it back to the playoffs. And then, the following year, they make it back to the NFC Championship game against the Rams. They lose that game. Oh, wait, yeah, they lose to the Rams. Then the following season, Trey Lance starting the year, he gets hurt. Jimmy Garoppolo plays, then he gets hurt. Brock Purdy comes in. You make it to the NFC Championship game, and what happens? Brock Purdy gets hurt on the very first drive, and the 49ers lose the NFC Championship game again. Then this year, they dealt with some struggles, when Deebo and Trent Williams got hurt. But, other than that, during the regular season, they were one of the best teams in the NFL. And they made it back to the Super Bowl. Did overcome some deficits in the playoffs. They were down against the Packers. They were down against the Lions, down by 17 against the Lions. They came back, won those games, made it to the Super Bowl. And, for a while there, they looked like the better team. But the Chiefs cashed in on mistakes, and ultimately, game goes into overtime. They get the ball. They can't get a touchdown. Chiefs go down the field. They score a touchdown. They win the Super Bowl. And they lose yet again, and yet again to the same team. So, yeah, I mean, we could say, oh, yeah, there's always next year. This team will definitely be, close to this spot again, be getting back to the Super Bowl. But, again, on a year-to-year basis, you have no idea what's going to happen. You have no idea. Again, knock on wood, they don't have something similar that happened back in 2020 where all their guys pretty much got hurt. Deebo missed some time, I believe. Kittle missed some time. Garoppolo got hurt. Guys on the defense got hurt. It was really. I mean, a lot of players on the team got hurt. Pretty much all their main guys, and then you make it back to the NFC Championship game, and unfortunately you lose to the Rams, who end up winning the Super Bowl, and then you lose to the Eagles, who lose in a shootout to the Chiefs. And then you get it back to the Super Bowl, and you lose to the Chiefs. It's you don't know. I mean, you have no idea. I mean, again, a team from the NFC could just come out of. There could be a team that comes out of nowhere. Team we don't even talk about. They come out of nowhere and they knock you off. But the conference is going to be better next year, and I've gone through this already. So yeah, you could say there's always next year, but you have no idea. And on top of that, there's guys that want to get paid. Brandon Ayuk, again, he's been a topic of conversation. He's a guy that wants to get paid. And if they can't work out a long-term extension with him, he could be somebody that ends up getting traded. So that's a guy that you could end up losing. You're not going to be able to keep everybody. And on top of that, players are getting older. And obviously, like Christian McCaffrey's got good years left in him. He's in a great situation now with the Niners. He's still got some great years left. But how much longer? He's playing the running back. He's playing running back. And the running back position, I've had many conversations about this. They age quickly. So, and McCaffrey's dealt with injuries over the course of his career. But, was healthy this year. Dealt with some nagging injuries, but he played pretty much every game. It's things change year to year. So, we could easily, I could come up here and say, yeah, the 49ers can easily make it back to the Super Bowl next year, but you just don't know. Because anything can happen. There are teams that finish the season, collapsing like the Eagles. Although the 49ers are the reason why, kind of one of the main reasons why the Eagles collapsed, because after that game, the Eagles just looked like a different team. You never know. The Lions and the Packers almost beat them. Those teams are going to be better, right? They should be. It's, and they had home field advantage, and sometimes, like, again, injuries can happen, and maybe, they go on a, losing streak like they did in the middle of the year, and maybe a team ends up getting home field advantage over them, and then they have to go on the road. Now, again, the 49ers are still a great team. I mean, no matter where they play, I mean, they're going to be a very tough opponent, regardless. But, you want to play those games at home. And, they had to go on the road in 2021. I mean, they were in Dallas, then they were in Green Bay, then they were in LA, but, that was basically 49ers, the 49ers fans took over. There's really no home field advantage at SoFi Stadium for both teams, the Chargers and the Rams. There's no home field advantage. You just see a bunch of red. Like when the Chargers are playing there, you're going to see, and the Chiefs are playing them, you're a bunch of red. Rams are playing the 49ers, there's a bunch of red there. SoFi Stadium is not the best for home field advantage. But yeah, then in 2022, they did host their first two playoff games, but then they had to go play the Eagles on the road. Now, again, I would have loved to have seen that Eagles team against the 49ers with Brock Purdy playing the whole game. I would have loved to have seen how that game would have unfolded. But, again, because you could say, oh, well, you just look at the regular season game. I don't know. The Eagles didn't have some of the same guys, especially in the secondary. And obviously they lost their coordinators as well. So the Eagles were, they did lose some guys. But so I wouldn't say it would have been that. But it definitely would have been, I think, a close game. But yeah, it's just it's unfortunate because you go back and you look at the Super Bowl. I mean, what else could they have done other than don't turn the ball over? I mean, a lot of people are complaining about, well, they should have went for it instead of kicking the ball, kicking a field goal in overtime. But it's, I don't know. You take the points, maybe your defense gets a stop. They didn't get the stop, but I think you still go for the points there. I was like fine with the 49ers getting the ball first and taking the points, but either way, like, if you got 7, the Chiefs were probably going to match it, but they did say they would go for 2 and win the game. So, the game was ending, regardless on that first Chiefs drive in overtime, even if they had to go down and get 7. But yeah, I mean the 49ers just the biggest mistake in that game, I in my opinion, was Ray McLeod muffing the punt. Because the Chiefs immediately cashed in on that. Immediately get a touchdown off of that. 49ers defense was getting stops, sacking Mahomes, picking him off the one time. And the 49ers gave the Chiefs a short field, and they cashed in. Now, I would have liked to have seen them get the ball to Deebo, to Ayuk, to Kittle more. I mean, the fact that they all combined had 8... All 3 of them combined had 8 catches, 8 receptions. And I can't really like complain when you're force-feeding Christian McCaffrey, but you got to give the ball to your playmakers. But that just didn't happen. Again, I just think it just came down to mistakes like that, the muff punt. Because if that doesn't happen, I mean that's one of the big reasons why the Chiefs, won the whole thing, is that one play. It was costly. And the 49ers, they got a couple turnovers. Pacheco also fumbled. The 49ers didn't cash in on that. I don't remember if they cashed in on the interception. But that's the difference. The Chiefs cashed in on turnovers, the 49ers did not. So if you really want to look at the biggest reason the 49ers lost the Super Bowl, it's because of that. Capitalizing on mistakes. But again, they lost another 10-point lead to this team. Although the first Super Bowl, that happened in, the fourth quarter, with like less than 10 minutes left. And the Chiefs just like rattled off 3 touchdowns. But yeah, it's tough, man. It really is. And I've been saying, I think the players on the 49ers deserve it. They deserve to get that ring. But again, some of them are getting older. Also, you're not going to be able to keep all the guys. I mean, they're going to be guys that you end up losing at some point in free agency. Or again, like I talked about Ayuk, if they can't agree on a long-term extension, maybe they end up trading him. It's next year, they got to figure it out. But, if they make it back there again, it's likely you might be seeing that team again. Because right now, again, there's teams that you could say, oh, this team could knock off the Chiefs. This team can knock off the Chiefs. But you got to see it first. And it's very tough to beat Mahomes in the playoffs. Only 2 guys have done it. And, 2 of those 3 playoff losses, it had to go, it was overtime. You had to take Mahomes to overtime to do it. The Super Bowl with the Bucs, yeah, that game was basically over, after the Bucs scored their first touchdown. But it's very tough. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. But, yeah, it's – I mean, you feel for that 49ers team. They've been so close for many years now, and it's just they cannot get over that hump. So, but again, I expect them to, at least get to the championship game next year. But we'll see. Again, that's way far in advance. So before I go into break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is GSMCpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So when we come back from our second break of the show, we will talk about the New York Giants and their struggles as an organization. Again, I wanted to go over the comments that Louis Riddick made recently as well regarding Daniel Jones. So that's what we will do. That's what we will discuss when we come back from our second break of the show. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we were going to talk about the Giants, their organizational struggles. I also wanted to get into what Louis Riddick had to say on Get Up recently. And that was yesterday. So this is what he said about the Giants. He said, "Isn't that amazing how stuff can turn on its head, and you wonder why the Giants haven't been able to make some headway in the NFC East and be true contenders. Because when you have this kind of thing that is happening within one calendar year, there's no way you can make headway. There's just no way. I just think it's unfortunate. I've never been a big supporter of Daniel Jones. I've always had my issues. But when you have this kind of flip-flopping and these kind of 180 turns away from people and these kinds of structural deficiencies, no wonder you can't make up any ground. No wonder." So basically he's talking about how there's that Rich Eisen said it, that the Giants basically, have buyer's remorse on the whole Daniel Jones contract. And, now with him tearing his ACL and, the neck injuries that he's dealt with, the second neck injury, the first one was obviously with Joe Judge. It's just, now it seems like the Giants are turning their back on Daniel Jones after, paying him. And, you had, John Mara come out and say, how he feels like the Giants, failed him. They haven't done right by him. And, this also goes back to as well with Eli Manning, too, is, after Eli Manning won the Super Bowl, the Giants just failed to build a contending team around him. And that was back when Jerry Reese was still the general manager. Then you brought in Dave Gettleman to try to fix things, and that just made things worse. And then, now you bring in Joe Shane, Brian Dable, and it looked like the Giants were, heading in the right direction because they take that massive, they're ahead of schedule. They win that playoff game against the Vikings, and you thought, okay, this is a good building block. I mean, they did lose to the Eagles the following week, and it wasn't great, but hey, at least you could look at it and say, you know what, the Giants weren't expected to do a lot. Let's see what they could do next year. And the schedule, when it came out, going to be difficult, but it was like, okay, the Giants could at least be competitive, and even if they don't make the playoffs, at least if they, look like they've taken the next step, they might not have the same amount of wins as the previous season, but if they're competitive in a lot of these games against these good teams, that's at least a good building block going into now 2024. But that was not the case because the Giants started off the season losing 40-0 to the Cowboys. And then from that point on, it was just downhill. And, you had Daniel Jones getting hurt, and, Tyrod Taylor came in, and he was playing, and then, Tyrod Taylor ends up getting hurt. You put in Tommy DeVito. Jones comes back because, again, that was the second neck injury now he was dealing with. I think because he got hurt in the Miami game. And then he comes back for the Raiders game, and he tears his ACL. And now Tommy DeVito plays, and, the whole Tommy Cutlets era, and then they end up benching him, putting in Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor basically finishes out the season. But the season was just not what the Giants were hoping for. But yeah, I mean, you look at Daniel Jones, and again, I don't think I never really thought he was the answer. I mean, after the playoff win against the Vikings, I'm like, okay, I know the Vikings defense in 2022 was not great. But, Jones made some throws in that game where I was like, okay, that was good. Maybe, the Giants, maybe he can be the guy. And again, he gets hurt. And I don't think, we haven't really gotten a fair assessment of what he can do because the Giants really just have failed him, and they failed Eli Manning towards the end of his career because you've gone through so many head coaches and GMs that, and the personnel that you've surrounded, or at least now you could say failed to surround both these quarterbacks, so you can't really evaluate Daniel Jones. It's just the offensive line is still not what the Giants have been hoping for. You got Andrew Thomas, but outside of that, it's a lot of question marks. You drafted Evan Neal, and he hasn't really turned out to be the player that they've hoped for. It's something that they're going to I think they're going to focus on in this draft. But again, it's just like an every year thing, and they just have failed to fix it. No matter what, Dave Gettleman wasn't able to do it. I mean, I still think Joe Shane and Brian Dable can, right the ship and get this, going in the right direction. I think it also just doesn't help that they kind of just inherited a lot of what remained from the Dave Gettleman era. And the fact that they were able to make the playoffs in 2022 was amazing. But again, you took a step back. And now you have no idea what the quarterback situation is going to be. And something that did hurt the Giants is, winning those last couple of games, winning a couple of games down the stretch. It was nice to beat the Eagles, but kind of hurt your draft positioning. Oh, and my camera just glitched out on me, guys. I apologize for that. Again, something that happens at least once or twice on the show, which I kind of saw it was coming because it was kind of glitching if you guys were noticing, but not a huge deal. But yeah, what hurt the Giants was winning those last couple of winning against the Eagles. It hurt their draft positioning because you could have been in the top 3. You could have maybe got one of the best quarterbacks. I mean, you could still. I mean, we'll see what they end up doing. But you guys know what I'm saying. But I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, do they trade back? I mean, do they trade up? I don't know. But, now they didn't franchise tag Saquon Barkley. They didn't franchise tag Xavier McKinney. The quarterback position, we'll see what happens. This team still in rebuild mode. After, a lot of us thought, okay, they could build off of 2022 and we go from there, but it's not the case. Now we're kind of going backwards. And, for a lot of Giant fans, it's unfortunate, for both New York teams that play in New Jersey. It's you think you're about to get out of it, and then it doesn't happen. Because the Giants and the Jets going into 2023, it looked like things were heading in a good direction, and then Giants lose 40-0 on Sunday Night Football, And then the following night, Aaron Rodgers tears his Achilles. And then, a lot of the optimism just got sucked out. And for the Giants, they've had a couple of years. I mean, the Jets haven't been to the playoffs since Mark Sanchez and Rex Ryan were with the team. Long time ago. With the Giants, they had a couple of years. 2016, they made the playoffs. And then they lost to Green Bay at the Odell boat trip. That whole thing. And then, obviously, you had 2022, where they did win a playoff game against the Vikings, which was great to see. But then you went and you played the Eagles in Philadelphia and kind of ended how a lot of games in Philadelphia have gone lately, and that was with the loss. So now it's I don't really know where they go from here. And they just have a lot of work that they have to do. And there's other things too. I mean, the whole thing with Brian Dable and Wink Martindale, it's just you don't really have confidence in this team right now. You don't want to see that. Now your head coach is beefing with your defensive coordinator, and now he's gone. Now he's the DC with Michigan. And then they brought over the defensive coordinator from Tennessee. So again, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's just the Giants have a lot of areas they need to address. And again, a big reason for why they're in the situation they're in is, again, from what remains from the Dave Gettleman era. And one of those big players was Daniel Jones. Joe Shane and Brian Dable, they inherited Daniel Jones. Now, could they have just let Daniel Jones walk instead of, giving him a contract and, start it over? Yeah, they could have. But again, Daniel Jones was coming off of a season, probably his best season, even though you look at the touchdown passes, it wasn't a lot. But he did run for a lot of touchdowns. So they thought they could build off of that. But it ended up just, again, a complete 180 from the previous season. And now, who knows where the Giants go from here. I mean, they're going to take a quarterback in this draft. And then it's just a matter of, well, you got other positions to fill. I mean, if Saquon Barkley, again, ends up leaving in free agency, I mean, running back's going to be something you got to address one way or another. You got to bring in some more wide receivers. I mean, you signed Paris Campbell. You drafted Jalen Hyatt. Paris Campbell really was just a non-factor. You traded for Darren Waller, and he ended up getting hurt. And now, contemplating retirement. So that ended up not working out. The offensive line, again, is still an issue. There are so many issues with the Giants that it's going to be tough to correct all of it in one offseason. Because it's not going to happen in one offseason. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But right now, it's just, again, they've been going in circles. They're one of those teams that has been going in circles for years. And you thought, okay, maybe they're about to get out of it, and then they're back going in circles again. And the last thing I want to see is them getting rid of Joe Shane and Brian Dable. Because then, again, now you got to go through another general manager and head coaching search. You did that already with Pat Shurmur and Joe Judge, and McAdoo was already in house when when Coughlin time was over there. But I mean, and it's enough already. They need some stability there. And again, now the season could have went a lot worse in 20. Well, now it did. Well, it did go a lot worse, but they at least were able to be competitive and win. Again, like I said, they won that game against the Eagles final week of the regular season. So you like to at least see, and they also beat the Packers too with Tommy DeVito. So that was nice. But again, it hurt their draft positioning, because they could have had a higher pick, and now, we'll see. Again, we'll see what they do. If they trade down, I don't know. But it's just, at least like for Brian Daboll, the team was competitive down the stretch, where it's like, okay, at least they were able to, at least it wasn't like every single game they just had no chance to win. Because again, they also were competitive against the Rams. They could have beat the Rams, a team that made the playoffs. The Giants would have won that game. I mean, Rams probably don't even make it. So, yeah, it's I don't know. They got to figure out a lot in the offseason, with a lot of different areas, and I've talked about this numerous times, but we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the Giants right now. What do you think they are? What do you think their plans are? And yeah, so when we come back from our final break of the show, apologize if you hear my dog barking, we'll talk about the Bills and the moves that they made recently, a lot of the guys that they released. So that is what we'll discuss when we come back. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to talk about the Bills roster overhaul. They released some big names from their team to save some cap space, so I did want to touch upon that. So these are the players that they released so far. So again, some notable names here. First was Tre'Davious White, who has had some major injuries over the past couple of seasons, but wasn't all pro corner, and yeah, he was one of the players that got released. Jordan Poyer, another key piece in the secondary. Both these guys, key pieces in the secondary. They released him. Mitch Morse, their center. Deontay Hardy, who ran back that had that return in the final game of the regular season against Miami. Nyheim Hines. And Siren Neal as well. He was also released. So now with that, Tre'Davious White, the Bills saved $10.2 million in cap space. The Jordan Poyer getting released, Bills saved $5.7 million. Mitch Morse, the Bills saved $8.5 million. Deontay Hardy, $4.2 million. Nyheim Hines, $4.7, and Siren Neal, $2.9 million. So this was to free up cap space. The Bills entered the day $40 million over the cap. They freed about $26 million. They'll receive an additional $10.2 million in June from Tre'Davious White's release. So, yeah, some key guys on, some notable names. And two guys, from the secondary. And on top of that, you got some free agents like Micah Hyde, Gabe Davis, who are also free agents. So, the Bills are going through some changes. And it is interesting. And, look, the team is coming off of a very disappointing end to their season, losing to the Chiefs at home. And, you knew changes were on the way. But yeah, and guys, we talk about the roster, defensive side of the ball getting a little bit on the older side. You also, and guys getting hurt. Matt Milano getting hurt, which hurt them, and obviously Tre'Davious White again, another major injury for him. And the other thing too is, so yeah, it's been tough for the Bills. And then on top of that, also Von Miller agreed to restructure his contract after the cuts. So, and then again, you also have free agents like, I think Micah Hyde's a free agent, but also Gabe Davis, Daquan Jones, Leonard Floyd, and AJ Epinenza as well. General Manager Brandon Beane also said that the team won't make big splashes in free agency due to cap constraints, focusing instead on the draft and finding value in free agency. So, yeah, the Bills right now are not in a position to go out and spend. They cut a lot of guys. So we'll see. It's really, this is going to be a big draft then, because you're going to have to replace some guys, on both sides of the ball. Now, the good thing is they do have Josh Allen, who is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So you still got him. James Cook had a good season. And again, we'll see what happens with Stephon Diggs. If he's sticking around. I know people are talking about him declining. Maybe maybe part of it is that, but you know what? I think Diggs is still a very good receiver, and the Bills want to keep him. So, but yeah, you're losing a lot of key guys on the defensive side of the ball, partly because of injuries. So that's something they're going to have to revamp. And when you're going up against teams like the Bengals and the Chiefs, if you want to take that next step, the Ravens, you got to retool that defense, because again, Josh Allen can get into shootouts, but we've seen. You go back to the playoff game against the Bengals. The Bengals, they dominated them, and Josh Allen really didn't keep up with them. But the final score was what, like 27 to 10, right? Wasn't that the final score of that game? So it just, we'll see. But yeah, this is a big year, big off season for them. They gotta retool this defense. They gotta get younger. I think that's the emphasis on getting younger as well. Look, I still look at the Bills. Again, as long as they got Josh Allen and he's healthy, this team is, going to be in it, in fighting for a playoff spot. But, then also you could see how 2023 went, and, at one point they were 6-6, and, they lose to the Eagles, and you're like, yeah, there's probably no really doesn't look like they're going to make the playoffs. And then they end up making the playoffs. They basically went out, end up being the 2 seed. You could definitely see maybe it going the other way, and then just not making the playoffs next year with, the overhaul that they've had here. But again, we'll have to see what they end up doing. But yeah, it's a lot of names, from this team that are going to be elsewhere. We'll see what the market is for Tre'Davious White, because again, he's coming off of, I think an ACL, and then 2023 was the Achilles. So it's just he's had bad luck, and you hope that he bounces back, and whatever team picks him up, he can stay on the field. But yeah, there's some good players that they are getting rid of. You also got Jordan Poyer in the secondary as well. Teams are gonna be looking to get these guys. Mitch Morse, their center. Just talked about a team that's hasn't been able to build an offensive line for a long time. So maybe he could be a guy that the Giants maybe go after. I don't know. Brian Dable's got and Joe Shane have the connections with the Bills. Maybe they, all those guys end up going to the Giants. Maybe they get Gabe Davis, Micah Hyde. Yeah, get all those guys. Why not? As a Giant fan, I'd take them. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. And listen, if the Bills have like a horrendous draft, and they end up, not finishing with a good record, well, general manager and head coach are most likely gone. And that also begs the question: is the Bills, their Super Bowl window? Because that's something that's been talked about the last couple of years. Is it completely shut? And I remember, Jim Nantz and Tony Romo were doing that Dolphins-Bills game earlier in the season, and that was when the Bills, scored over 40 points against them, and Jim Nantz was saying, I don't understand why people are saying that, their window is closed, or is closing. Well, and then, listen, they ended up getting the 2 seed, and they definitely could have made a run. It's just, unfortunately, like many other teams, you ran into the Kansas City Chiefs. So, again, it really all depends on how they, address free agency, address the draft. Because if they can, revamp the defense and, add some more weapons to the offensive side of the ball. Because, I mean, you need another threat besides Stephon Diggs when it comes to the receivers. I mean, I like their tight ends. Dolan Kincaid looks like he's going to be a good player. And listen, they use James Cook a lot in certain games. I mean, the Cowboys game, he was unbelievable. But, you need other guys to step up. I mean, Khalil Shakir looks like he's he's a good player for the Bills, but you need another weapon on that side of the ball too. And on top of that, you also got to make sure that you protect Josh Allen. You don't want Josh Allen taking too many hits. He takes enough of them when he's, taking off with the ball. But, again, only time will tell what, the Bills end up doing. And, again, they play in the AFC, which is like I said at the top of the show, it's a gauntlet. Got a lot of teams you got to deal with. The Dolphins, they released a lot of guys too. Team in your own division. You got the Patriots, they're in rebuild mode. The Jets, I mean, we'll see if Rodgers is healthy, they're going to be better. And then of course you got the Dolphins, like I just said, you got to respect them. So, but then if the division ends up not, being in the cards and you got to fight for a wild card spot, you got all the teams in the AFC North. AFC South is going to be more competitive. And then you got the AFC West. That will be somewhat of a better division, even though it'll still probably be the Chiefs that are on top. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. But again, they got Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and as long as he's playing well, the Bills, once they changed offensive coordinators, things, turned around for them. So I think as long as they got, him and, if Diggs can turn it around, they're going to win games next year and, be competitive, be at least a playoff team. Super Bowl contender, I don't know. Because right now they just, the Chiefs and the Bengals have knocked them off. I mean, the Chiefs especially. 3 of the last 4 years now. It's been tough. So, we'll see what happens. But free agency is coming up. Draft soon after that. We're moving right along here in the off season. But yeah, it was definitely surprising seeing. But I mean, you get it from a financial standpoint, but just again, a lot of notable names that the Bills they let go, and yeah, the roster is going to be it's going to be different next year. But like I said, you still got your quarterback. So I think the Bills, they'll still be a good team, but this is going to be a kind of a big offseason for them as they kind of deal with their cap constraints. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Back to a full show today after a little bit of a condensed show yesterday. I had a long day yesterday, but it's all good now. We got, obviously the full show today, full show tomorrow, and then it'll be it. Weekend already. It's like I always say, these days, these weeks, just they really fly by. So, but yeah, that is all the time that we have for today. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow, and until then, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.